And yeah, so here we are. I think we are live.
Pat Ackerman, ladies and gentlemen, in the flesh.
Yeah, man. He's here.
Ryan, shoot a tweet out if you can and let people know the Ackerman hour is here.
I'll just retweet yours from earlier saying we've begun.
Hey, folks, thanks for joining us. This is a really cool Saturday, and we have Pat Ackerman on, who just recently authored the article, The Relativity of VGX in Crypto, which we're going to go over today. So, Pat, really appreciate the Saturday time slot for us. And I'm joined alongside with Ryan Gorman, who everybody knows from our daily Trade the Change show, and as well, crypto analyst CJ from marketrebellion.com. So, Pat, it's now been called the Ackerman Hour. That's what we call it.
That's pretty special, Alex. That's pretty special.
So this is timely because you have a lot of different mentalities with investors in Voyager. And of course, we had Steve on with the Voyager loyalty program announcement some ways back, and then we had him on again the other day to talk about the token swap. And a lot of people just mentally are like, wow, I feel like things have stalled. I think Voyager is taking time to digest all that happened back in January and February, and then of course you have that lapse of time between the new Voyager program and the token swap, and so there's always a lot of built up anticipation. But with your article, it's timely because it's this, non-Voyager associated person who's kind of taking a look at the company as it rolls forward and giving their best insight. So I'd love to go through that article, the relativity of VGX and crypto, and kind of, if you could brief everybody on it who hasn't read it, you should read it. We'll put the link below to all of Pat Ackerman's stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to, Alex. I think, as I sit back and I watch the sentiment, sentiment in the community really is tied to price. And I've been in the community for a fairly long period of time, and every period of time is always it appears to be tied to price. And the reason why I started writing around Voyager was because I felt like there was a disconnect between the fundamentals of the company and where it was headed, and what the price of the sentiment of the time was. And this is back in kind of October, November timeframe, where we were kind of in a consolidation period where we went from kind of new highs in July and August, about 25 cents, remember, and then kind of consolidated back to 10 into kind of that 12, 14, 15, 16 range. And I felt like the long-term prospects and the fundamental value of the company was really being misunderstood by investors. So I started writing back then. So I feel like it's another time like that, in my opinion. The sentiment gets so skewed with the everyday 1 minute, 2 minute, hour, daily, price charts, and because again, that's the data that's available. The Voyager's only giving quarterly updates or monthly updates at best sometimes, and when those kind of slow down a little bit, people get a little nervous, especially as price consolidates down a little bit. Even though we're up still, several thousands of percent in a few months, it's still, a lot of new investors and things like that. So, the premise around relativity of VGX and crypto was around, the company's still moving very fast, and we're comparing ourselves to the daily charts and comparing ourselves to other projects and companies out there that are doing well. And I think we lose sight in the fact that we're still growing very rapidly. And one of the points I brought up in the article is that just looking at App Store downloads, at the time I wrote the article, we were number 35 in the iOS store in the finance the finance apps. And I think the last week or so we've been up to 18, 17, back to 20. One of the highest ones out there, just behind Coinbase and crypto.com, but ahead of Binance US and ahead of Gemini and Kraken and all the other kind of bigger exchanges, right? And I think we lose sight of that. And so the whole premise was that if you're comparing yourself against everything else in the community, it's not necessarily the best comparison. You need to be looking at where we headed long term and where we're, what the company's doing. So that's why I wrote it and kind of the premise around it. And to me, it feels like another November December timeframe where we're consolidating back down and getting ready for the next leg, which will be the token swap and the loyalty program launch.
Yeah, real quickly, I mean, when it comes down to that, the token swap is this, much anticipated event to kind of incorporate the Voyager loyalty program and stuff like that. How important, and there's a couple different things with the news cycle as it goes throughout the year, right? You have New York, Canada, EU, so there's some big events that are about to unfold. How big is this token swap coming up in about 6 weeks going to be?
I think it's pretty massive, really, if you look at the larger events that happened with the company, because it's the first one I'm aware of where we've merged two kinds of tokens, an emergent situation, right? So I think it's actually a precedence across the industry as at large. And secondly, there's a lot of additional features and functionality that come with the token swap itself, such as community governance, higher interest rates, and then you have the whole loyalty program piece that's wrapped around that. Which will be as big as well, right? With the cashback on trades and debit card, credit card. I think it's all being kind of wrapped into one event. And even Steve talked about it, new UI, new awareness in the app around the program itself, right? I mean, to me, it's bigger than just a token swap. It's loyalty program, it's new UI, it's more community engagement, right? Governance, utility. I think it's a pretty large event in the overall Voyager platform, because it's introducing utility to the token, which we've had a little bit of utility along the way, but this is the big event for that. Now the other ones with Canada. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
No, go ahead. Finish, please.
Yeah. So it's really about utility for me, and then you have like Canada and New York. Those are market growth opportunities, and those are going to be coming along with it. So utility, growth, those packaged together over time, I think, is where the explosive price action and some of my predictions have come from. So, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, sure. So, back in your first post in October, you talk about how there's going to be a dilution of VGX tokens by VGX shareholders from the LGO token swap of about 14%, right?
Yep.
And then the allocation pool, there could be another 16% dilution. It could be. Well, may not go that high, but we're looking at possibly a 30% dilution of tokens until the 20 million or so zombie tokens that haven't been moved over the past few years are burned because they're not converted. Feels to me like that inflationary pressure on the token would cause prices to stay level or actually go downward over the next 12 months following that token swap. You think there's enough upward momentum in the platform to counteract that downward pressure?
I personally do, because of the explosive action of getting new funded accounts, right? So if you look at where we were in December and in November in terms of funded accounts and where we are now, I mean, we're hundreds of percent higher than that, right? And so if you look at the growth of the new user growth, it will outpace the dilution quite a bit, in my opinion, which is where you're still going to see upward momentum of the token price. Again, I think there's, yeah.
One more point on that. During the recent earnings call, Steve was saying that they're kind of maxing out, but hoping to pass 65 to 70 new accounts a month. And currently, they're only getting about 30% of those accounts funded, which trails significantly behind a Coinbase or their other competitors. So if we're looking at maybe rising up to 40% of accounts funded, and we're only able to get, say, 80,000 of them onboarded. If you look at the tweet you shared back on March 16th with the token efficiency projections that we've all seen, it feels like we're going to be stuck towards the lower band through at least the end of the year. And if we're stuck at the lower end of that band, the token's fairly valued. It may go up a little, but I can't. That's why I was asking about your price prediction before the show, because based on that lower band, we're at $10 a coin.
Yeah,
right?
but also, I just want to throw in there, Ryan, is that there's so much, first of all, there's little hints that Steve drops, like he dropped on our show and he's dropped on other shows, which is stocks and equities, right? So you're not even factoring in the fact that Voyager with its broker type model, and it's not even almost fair to compare it to Coinbase, because this crypto broker model is just taking heed right now, and Voyager is leading that path. And now you're going to have, if you're talking about equities on top of it, it's bigger than I think the $10 fair value. But I see your side, Ryan.
Also, to that point,
Yep.
sorry, Pat, if we're going to say, okay, equities added to the platform, and this is something we discussed yesterday, Alex, right? If equities are added to the platform, let's say they're approved by FINRA in, I don't know, 60 days. It's going to take a significant amount of time to get them onto the platform, at least based on my experience with eToro. That's an incumbent in the crypto trading space here in the US, and they were approved for stocks late last year. They still haven't been able to add them to the account because the technology doesn't exist.
You don't know that Steve hasn't gone and done all those filings and everything yet. We don't know where that situation stands. He may be, the news we hear may come out of the gate with listed equities. And by the way, Brian and I are playing good cop, bad cop. He's obviously the bad one, you know.
No, it's more just casting, I think, a rational eye on all of this, because so many people talk about the velocity of Voyager and it going up to $35, $40, $50 a coin. And I don't doubt that that will happen eventually. I just don't see it happening over the next 12 months, especially with the dilution of the token, the inability to add equities yet because we don't even have FINRA approval, and we still haven't brought those other jurisdictions on board. Once those jurisdictions come on board, I see it, you know, stratosphere, you know.
But and after I talk, we'll let, this is the Ackerman hour, but we'll let him talk. You're talking about account growth. Don't sleep on the account growth, and especially don't sleep on the account growth with the additions of Canada, New York, and I mean, those geographical areas are so much. I mean, New York's almost equal to the 49 other states, in my opinion, as far as potential account growth.
But the one question I had from all of that, because I was getting somewhere with this, does that mean that the higher end of your price projection may be inaccurate, or that the model itself is inaccurate?
Yeah, so again, really good points, Ryan. And I think kudos for you to bringing in some kind of good logic around concerns, right? There's still concerns out there. I think in the long term, we're still in that kind of $40, $50. And I still believe this year because of what Alex is kind of mentioning, right? You have more product growth into these other markets are going to be coming. Now, it's, again, a little delayed from that standpoint, but I do think the token swap and the utility program brings higher utility that actually helps with the conversion of downloads and account growth, right? So you talked about the big gap, about 50% of users and funded accounts. I actually think it helps with getting higher conversion of those. We'll see over time, and I still feel like that counteracts some of that. I also think we're not baking in some of the things that are coming in. We don't know what everything's in there. We have crypto stocks coming, and he's mentioned it several times of announcement coming. And to me, I do think there's probably a shorter window than that, than even eToro. You talked about eToro, right? They're just going to be taken public as part of a SPAC, about $10 billion, right? They had about 70% of their accounts in Europe and about 20% in Asia, very small percent in the US. So to me, those growth markets that we're not even in yet actually are bigger markets than we're even in the US side of it. So I actually think there's a bigger lift from those that will be coming as well. And the other thing on the eToro side, they actually had about 6 times return in their marketing funds, which I thought was fascinating because you talked about this $40 million allocation pool, which is about $5, about $200 million. If you can get a 5 or 6 times return on that amount of money, I think you're actually talking a much bigger conversion rate of funded accounts from downloads, and actually think you have better utility over time because of that. And so I actually think there's a lot more at play here that maybe you're not really factoring into, in my opinion, when you talk about the growth of the platform and the price of VGX.
That's fair.
I want to bring that question up as well on a related note with international traders, people who are using or who are just trading VGX, not on the Voyager platform. So like you said, Pat, we've been seeing a majority of the volume, over half of the volume on VGX coming from Binance, other places in Asia. You know, how do you think that will change? Do you think the US volume will eventually grow to surpass that of Binance? Or because what I find is that it leads to price getting way overextended in the short term in periods of bullish mania. And then the inverse when we reach, periods of like drastic depression, which is what we're in kind of right now. I feel like we're very close to capitulation. But what is your view on that, and how do you assess the international market?
Yeah, I think the international market's key, right? Again, we talked about there's a huge amount of crypto demand in Europe and Asia and all those markets, right? And so as they grow in those markets, I think it's key. And the reason why you have a lot of kind of growth and then kind of decline from that, there's no utility in those markets. They don't even get interest from the funds that they hold there, right? You only get that if you have on the Voyager platform. So I think as Voyager gets into these other markets and actually has utility in the token, it's incentivizing the holding of that, and so less on the trading side of it. I think the demand, we're under appreciating the demand that we have in Europe already for the token, and even the marketing of the token itself already in those markets, right? I mean, a huge amount of the Telegram group that Alex talks about is actually from Europe, and from that market, and they have no utility right now. They believe in the future of the company, and they've been since the beginning, and so. I think as you get into these other markets, you actually smooth out some. Did we lose you? Still there?
No, you're still there. You're still there.
Okay. You went quiet. Either it was a really good point or it wasn't. I'm not sure.
No, it was a really good point. You just went into that, slow robotic mode when the internet.
Yeah.
I think, listen, I think you're right. I'm on the side of Pat with the, we're going into uncharted price discovery as far as account accumulation is concerned, in my opinion. I think that the European expansion, the other geographical expansions outweigh maybe the lower funded account slope that maybe some of the peers have. And whatnot. With regards to, what's interesting, Pat, is up until I'd say lately, the token has correlated with the VGX, with Voyager stock. I find that interesting as a token that it did that. Now there's been a divergence of sorts with that. What are your thoughts on the fact that, here we have this token and it does behave almost like a stock to the company?
Yeah, be careful how you use that phrase, Alex. It's not a security token. So
not a security token.
What we found in the research, especially since November, and you'll see charts that I share out there around the loop, I call it, where it seems like the stock actually will take off and proceed higher, and the token will kind of consolidate during that period, and then the stock will kind of consolidate back a little bit, and actually the token will catch up with it, and or a lot of times surpass it. In many cases, and this has happened 3 times pretty predictably since November, and now we're seeing the token the stock take off back to getting in line with where it should be, and probably proceeding a little bit higher, probably a little bit on the back news of the eToro news and some other things in the market. But I think that bodes well, really, in the short term for VGX, because almost every single time we've seen this happen since last year, we've seen the stock run up, and then we see the token follow there shortly thereafter. A lot of times it's correlated with news of some kind around it, and to me, we're going to be lining up almost directly with the swap and the loyalty program announcement, and even possibly an announcement around crypto stocks that Steve had talked about. So to me, I think I feel really good about where we are from a price standpoint, because the value is higher, and those that are wanting to get into the tiers, it's a great opportunity for them.
So I'm getting smashed. Go ahead, CJ. Yeah.
That's such an interesting point with Voyager stock relative to VGX, because with a lot of those blockchain related stocks or Bitcoin related stocks in general, we see them typically going up in tandem with Bitcoin as it reaches. And then, we have that capital that then flows into the altcoins like VGX as profit takers, move money from Bitcoin to the altcoin market. So that would really make sense about why there would kind of be that like slingshot effect with VGX catching up to the actual stock price. My question to you, Pat, is that it kind of seems like we're in a pretty depressed period. You were talking about how sentiment goes downward with price earlier, and perhaps how we're close to capitulation. Are you accumulating more VGX? Are you buying VGX at these levels?
I am. Yeah, I am. I think VGX, the value, what I always talk about is price and value are so different, right? The value is fundamental and price is arbitrary. So any period of time, price can be higher or lower than your value. And so you want to be deploying funds when the price is below value, if you can get it. And this is the perfect time to be doing that. And that's from an investor mindset standpoint, that's something I would say about any token. If you can find the value of what it's representing, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other ones, find out where it's below its valued period of time. That's the great times to actually accumulate. Same thing with VYGVF. I tweeted about 10, 12 days ago, 2 weeks ago. It was significantly below value. I could call it hysterically below value. It's up 100% plus since then, right? And I think that's where, as an investor, you want to be thinking about when to deploy funds And this, in my opinion, not financial advice, don't listen to what I say, but this is a great value proposition as of this point.
CJ, that's a great point. And I'm getting hammered right now in the comments for saying I think VGX is fair valued at $10. But to be clear, and I agree with you completely, Pat, I'm also accumulating VGX right now. This is the time to be buying it because it's at a discount, right? Long term, I am absolutely bullish. I just think this year is more of an accumulation phase and a value opportunity than an appreciation phase. I guess we'll find out which one of us is right. You're probably right, and I'm probably wrong. But that's the way it feels to me based on some of the metrics I've seen, some of the statements coming out of earnings calls and chats we've had with Steve. So Ehrlich, that is.
Well,
so
we do like to see it when you are wrong, Ryan, because you come out with very very nice articles of apology in newspapers.
Yeah, one point I go back to, Ryan, you talked about the allocation pool, and one thing I think we forget about the allocation pool is a lot of that goes back in the hands of people that are using and engaging in the platform. They're not traders necessarily of VGX. They're actually utilizing the platform, and the allocations pool is using for the growth of VGX, but also to allocate back to the user community that's engaging in the platform itself. They're not looking to trade VGX. And so in my opinion, a lot of that, allocation dilution is actually just going back in the hands of people that value holding it because of the utility that they get from it. And so if you talk about, some of the short-term impacts of the dilution and some of those things, I feel like they're somewhat overblown, especially with the pace of user growth, the pace of downloads, the pace of the company itself, which is why I called it, relativity, because what are we comparing it against? If we're comparing against Luna, who's just gone crazy in the last 14 days, that's a different comparison than if you're comparing it against something else that's been down, right? So I don't, in my opinion, I feel like some of those things are a little bit overblown in my opinion, but again, everybody has their own perspective, right? So
fair.
What do you let's address something and get your thoughts on people throwing out the Robinhood name and Voyager. Now it may not be Robinhood, but is there any does it make sense in the near future for one of these companies to give Steve a call and talk about acquisition mode, or does it make more sense for Voyager to keep going down its route that it's currently traveling?
It's going to have to be Schwab or somebody really big.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be ironic if E-Trade bought them?
I think people talk about this a lot, and I don't think it's a Robinhood. To CJ's point, I actually think it's a big player that's not in the space at all, in my opinion, because Steve and team have built a platform that's unbelievably flexible, great UI, the best, in my opinion, of any of the ones I've tried out there, and I've tried a lot of them, with the best focus, I think, in the customer's lens, right? And so in my opinion, I think they need a big player that's not even in the crypto space, that would partner, that actually would accelerate the community and the platform itself, than finding somebody like you mentioned Robinhood. I just don't think that's a great partnership. I think you're looking for somebody really big that has a lot of clients and companies that they work with, in my opinion. So
like a bulge bracket bank.
A what?
A bulge bracket bank. So like a JP Morgan.
Yes.
Yeah, or to an E-Trade or Schwab, or right, some of these companies just are not in crypto at all, because Steve has built a platform that can do stocks, can do crypto, right? And so to me, it's more of a bolt-on or an add-on to a company that's really large, has a lot of clients that want to get exposure to it, and they don't want to miss the boat.
I want to bring up another point, because this is a question that we get quite frequently. And if we are really evaluating VGX in the long term, I think this is something we should consider, which is the acquisition possibility that you were bringing up, Alex. What happens to the token if we get an acquisition or something like that comes up down the line? I assume there's not really a clear-cut answer, but that's just something I want to put out for you guys.
Great question.
There's not a clear-cut answer, right? There's no law that says they have to do anything with the token, right? That's putting some risk in the market from a token standpoint. But what we've seen, and we've seen Steve and team value the token holders, and they did it in the LGO market, right? And so to me, it goes back to what is leadership demonstrating in terms of their priorities, and in my opinion, they've prioritized token holders as well. And so to me, unless there's some assurances around what the token future use is, I have a hard time seeing them do a full deal. because that's a huge part of the company, right? I think there was even an interview where it was on Relavision that talked about tokens being the third leg of a capital structure, right? Where you have debts, you have equity, and now you have tokens, which are representing of user growth. And actually, most companies are actually purchasing because of the growth of the company and the user growth potential that comes with that. And so to kill off a third leg of the asset structure is kind of poor business in that opinion, because you're going to lose so many new users you could be potentially being either bringing on or losing because of the acquisition cost of that. So again, I think it goes back to trust and what you've seen to demonstrate, but also thinking about what is a token represent on the balance sheet of a company. And to me, it's a new chapter of kind of liquidity and capital structure for a company. And what does it represent? Represent new user in a community that helps them grow.
So I don't know of any other publicly traded companies that have a token that are listed in the US, right? I know Voyager is listed in Canada, but are there, let's say a publicly listed company in the US, a bulge bracket bank, buys Voyager so they can have that crypto brokerage and they can marry it with their equities brokerage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a comparable corporate structure? Because if there isn't, I could see coin holders just being converted to like some kind of digital equity, potentially. And that wouldn't necessarily be a terrible thing. It would negate the utility of the token. But if there's no way for a publicly listed company in the US to have a token like that for US token holders, I mean, that could be a potential outcome. I don't think they just cancel the coin altogether.
Yeah, again, I think we're speculating somewhat from our standpoint, right? But I would say there's already a publicly traded company that has a token. It's called Voyager, right? It is one of the only ones that are out there, Ryan. So that's fair. But again, I think if you really get companies to understand what are you purchasing, and I think Steve and team really understand the value of the token as part of the capital structure for their company, you wouldn't allow the acquisition to go through unless you had the company buying it, understanding what they were buying themselves into and how they would utilize it to help grow their company, or even incentivize current holders or current customers to benefit from the overall platform as well. So again, I know we're speculating a little bit, so there's a number of different things and avenues that could go with it. But I think more than anything else, it's understanding how does it fit into the capital structure of a company, how does it benefit them longer term.
Yeah. What else we got? Pat, what are you working on now when it comes to your next segment of your Medium account? And folks, if you're joining late, you got to check out Pat. You got to follow him on Twitter and Medium because he puts out some really great information. And with any luck, CJ Ryan and myself will try to also use his talents for other things too. So we'll see. But what is the next phase here? What would you like to see short term happen to VGX or to Voyager as a company to kind of continue the support and foundation that it's built over the last, say, 4 months parabolically?
Yeah, I think it's really about transparency, and I give kudos to Steve for coming on your show, and great job for you guys asking him tough questions. You essentially went to the community and said, "Give me all your questions." You asked them all, right? And I think the best thing the company can do at this point is be transparent about where they are in the plans for delivering the token swap and other things that are coming out. As transparent they can be as a publicly traded company. But I think, as Steve mentioned, they continue to bring out new things over time. Has to happen, right? It can't, at the point we are right now in the next 6 weeks of time, we're waiting for it to come out. I think there'll be a lot of concern if we don't hear a lot from the company over the next 6 weeks. So I think there needs to be communications, continued engagement with the community, and likely probably a few things that need to come out in the meantime to kind of keep us where we are. Because right now we're still holding onto the utility that originally existed, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the parabolic move was the anticipation of the VLP and the token swap happening. And so now we're consolidating back down a little bit because we haven't got clarity on that yet. So I think for sustainability of the community, I think it's more transparency, communication, and what additional things can we get out in front of them. So
one of the things I want to point out is Steve Rollick's been in the live chat on this broadcast the whole time since we've been streaming. Okay.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Oh, no, now I just saw sweat form up. He didn't. So, Steve's been watching this. Steve is really good about watching, all the different things that go on with Voyager and what's said about him so he can take back any criticism and kind of work on it. Now, Pat, you listened to the investors report that came or the investor call that happened. What would you do, if anything, differently when it comes to those investor calls? It was a relatively short call. There was I believe, two major speakers that were there, which was Steve and another gentleman. But what would you do different as far as dispensing information, or is there anything that would be changed?
No, I think in my opinion, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, again, what do we want to hear? We want to hear how it's going, what's their opinion, what's coming up. I want to hear the numbers. And to me, it hits a lot of the boxes. Now, I would love to see some VGX community members be there. I'd be able to ask a question here or there, right? I think that would be great representation, because I think what Steve and team have the opportunity to do is represent that token holders are a part and a valuable member of the company structure itself. So any kind of those opportunities to include the community into those conversations, I think are awesome, because it gives the whether it's a perception or not, that the company's more than just a stock, which it is. And even though he says it all the time and demonstrates it all the time, I think those opportunities are important and are well received within the community, because it is important community that helps market the company, helps them grow. So I think overall I was pretty happy with it, in my opinion. But those are a couple of thoughts.
One quick question I wanted to ask you that came from the live chat on the YouTube stream, Daniel Sarver, I think. He's talking about how the performance could be impacted by the end of Bitcoin's bull run, right? So let's say Bitcoin's bull run ends this summer. Does your model account for that, or are we looking at a bull run continuing through the end of the year? And would that impact your price prediction for year end?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a bear market, I actually wrote an article just before my last one that was about the kind of VGX macro storms that happen and the broader markets themselves. So VGX is not immune to market impacts of any kind, right? If Bitcoin, has a move down, a bearish move down, we're going to follow to some degree. Now, what I would say is VGX is structured in a way to hold for benefits. Right, you're still getting interest boosters, right? You're going to cash back on trades. You're going like all of the future utility that comes with the Voyager loyalty program does matter to holding the token longer term. So it's not immune. It'll come down as well. But again, most of the holders are actually holding it for other benefits, and so I think it'll help hold it up in one of the better tokens out there. But it's not immune. Now, I would say even the crypto market as a whole is not immune to the broader kind of macro environment of investing either, right? I mean, we've seen treasury yields go a lot higher, and I think that's kind of hurt Bitcoin a little bit because there's some uncertainty in the market, and so we've seen it kind of stabilize. It's gone a little bit back to 60,000 now. We'll see what goes next, but I think we can't say crypto's immune to the broader macro environment of investing, and we can't say that VGX is immune to the broader Bitcoin crypto market either. But I think the way it's designed should help it hold up better in the longer term. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things happening in the ecosystem, from what you mentioned, traditional markets, treasury rates, and inflation, deflation, and Bitcoin. There's so many things. And also, Steve is a CEO, just like some other companies, but he has he has shareholders to contend with, and he has a very lively group of token holders to deal with. So it's almost like
passionate.
It's almost like having a dual role. But to Ryan's point, that time frame, that roadmap, the market as a broader scheme needs to kind of stay afloat in order to facilitate that positive alpha action that we're all expecting. So hopefully that does happen.
Yeah, and I wrote about that in my article, the relativity article, Alex, and the fact that what's great about being a VGX holder is I can cheer for any number of tokens to do well, because whether it's a Luna or a Stormax or any number one of these other ones, the broader market success of crypto is a success of Voyager, the company, and VGX itself, right? And so I don't need to concern myself. Now, again, if I'm on the trader mindset, Ryan, which I know you fit in a lot more than I do, and even CJ does, and you're looking for kind of in and outs in some of these other ones, to me, a larger portion of my portfolio will just be continued to be invested in Voyager, because it's a broader play on the wave of assets, digital assets being a part of a portfolio, and the demographics change of those in the 20s and 30s that believe it to be a fairer market. And I think Voyager plays a big role in that in the long term, whether it's, again, I'm not looking at the daily charts, I'm looking at the long-term trajectory of it. And that's what I think matters the most.
Yeah, this group knows nothing about that Stormex company that you brought up.
Hey, good call, by the way,
Are
Alex.
they?
That was
Who even are they?
fantastic.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, no, you're correct. I mean, and it's so difficult also with Steve. He wants to share as much as he can, and he
Yep.
does within the limits of the law and the regulatory framework that's allowed. So,
Yep.
CJ, Ryan, do you have any questions for anybody? Is there anything from our live chat that should be asked?
A lot of viewers are interested in aspects, maybe applying the model to, say, Stormex, or any thoughts to do that in the future.
That would be fun.
Let's not put him on the spot here, CJ.
I'm just saying, any thoughts,
Anything is
any
possible.
ambitions.
Yeah. Anything's possible. I think, one thing we've got to remember, one of the reasons why I did so much due diligence into VGX is because the data was available. And so for these other tokens, a lot of times, I've started to look a little bit into Stormex and some other tokens as well. It's just not hard to get the data because it's not publicly available, right? Like it was consistently with Voyager. If you get me the data, and I'm happy to do it. I will do it, and I will share it, and for the broader community, you bet.
We'll get you, Simon, you the CEO of Stormex, and Steve Ehrlich all on a screen together, and then we'll just watch and see what happens.
That'd be fun. I'd love that.
That'd be fun.
Crazy stuff. Good done. Folks, again, Pat, thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday. We really appreciate you taking the time out like that. Thank you. Yes. And it seems like, our Saturday videos or our weekend videos tend to be you and Steve Ehrlich. So, it's good people that take weekend time because we know you got families to deal with and all that. Everybody, all his information is going to be down below. Click on it, follow him. He is a smart guy. We're lucky to have him as a friend of ours here, and we will continue to converse with him to get the unbiased side of updates when it comes to Metcalfe's Law, when it comes to Voyager and other interesting projects, hopefully in the future. So, Pat, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, guys.